A gute Woche. The Rabbi Zolgesund, I began to Farbrengen this afternoon that today was Parshas Vayigash. In Parshas Vayigash we read about Yehuda getting close to Yosef. Yosef, who at that time was the Mishnah Lamelech, who was given all the power by Paroi. As the Pasuk tells us that Paroi told him, Bilodecho lo yorim ish es yodei ve'es ragli. Without you, nobody has permission to raise their hand or their feet. And this is something which was for those people as well as for their descendants as well. And this indicates to us how great the power of Yosef was. And to Yosef was the Hagosha, was the getting close of Yehuda. And as it's brought out in Sforim that this Hagosha, this Vayigash of Yehuda to Yosef, this is reflected in Halacha as well. This is the concept of smichus geula litfila, of bringing close geula to tefillah. As we daven every day in davening, we ask the Rebishter Goal Yisrael. That is how we conclude before Shmona Esrei. That's the inyan of geula, and right thereafter we continue into tefillah. Even though this entire inyan of Yehuda getting close to Yosef is something which was later proven that they were brothers, so this whole inyan actually turned out different later, because later it was proven that the real relationship between Yehuda and Yosef. But nonetheless, being that this is mentioned in Torah, any inyan which is mentioned in Torah, even though later it changes, or later situation changes, or whatever it may be, still it remains eternal, and there is a lesson, there is a hira in it, and an hira of truth in it. Why? Because this is part of Torah, Torah's emes, and Torah's emes means that all the hiras, all the lessons which we get out of Torah, and are based on Torah, are based on truth. To the extent that from these psukim here of Vayigash, the Gemara derives from the words that Yehuda said to Yosef, "Anoichi ervenu miyodi tevakshenu." We derive even a halacha which is derived from these words. And again, even though later it was proven that there was no need for Yehuda to say all this, it did not remain that way, because of the situation that was revealed that Yehuda and Yosef are brothers. But nonetheless, being that this is mentioned in Torah, we can even derive halachas from it. And the same thing relates to each and every Yid. Each and every Yid has his shaychus to Torah. As the Pasuk says, V'chol banayich, ali Yidin, kol banayich, are called limudei Hashem. And that's why even when Bezdin paskens something, and something which was paskened in accordance to halacha, it was paskened according to the majority, or not even the majority, the entire Bezdin agreed on this psak. Nonetheless, later another Bezdin can come, and then when it is done in accordance to all the proper requirements of halacha, the second Bezdin can make void the psak of the first Bezdin. The Rebbe is continuing that this also has a shaychus, this whole inyan has a shaychus to the concept of Golus. We are already over 1900 years in Golus, and we're asking from the Rebishter a few times a day. Each time we daven, we say, V'sachzenu eineinu b'shuv cholotziyim b'rachamim, as well as asking the Rebishter, Semach David avdecha, meheros hatzmiyach. So Yidden have this koyach, that Yidden can pasken, that it is already kolu kol akitzin, all the set times have already passed, and the time has come that the Rebbe should take it, and miyad should immediately bring us into a position of geula, which this is the concept of a Vayigash el of Yehuda. Yehuda is getting close to Yosef. Yosef is the Mishnah Lamelech of Eretz Mitzrayim, and what is he asking from him? He's asking from him an inyan of geula. He's requiring geula. He's demanding geula. And when we are saying that there's something wrong in Galus, the Rebbe is continuing, it doesn't mean that Yidden are lacking things. There are things missing. Just the mere fact that we are in Galus, this in itself is the problem. Banim shegalu mishulchan aviyim, children that are being driven away from their father's table. Where is the place of a child? The place of a child is to be by his father's table. And when he is away from there, this in itself is the biggest problem. And that is why when children Banim shegolu mishulchan aviyem. The Rebishter is with Yidden, and the Shechina goes along with them. The Shechina goes along with Yidden in Golus. But nonetheless, this is not where the place of a Yid is. The place of a Yid is not in Golus. And even though in Golus he may be in a position that he will have whatever he needs, as the siyum, as the end of this parsha finishes off, Vayeshev Yisrael be'eretz Mitzrayim, that Yaakov settled in Mitzrayim, Vayifru, Vayirbu me'oid, and they had everything in a format of ma'oid. What is the taich ma'oid? Ma'oid means above any type of limitation. L'maylam emdida v'agbal, Vayachsu ba, and they held on to it. Vayachsu, this is an expression which is usually used l'shon achiza, and an Indian of achiza. This is also related when we want to talk about a yerusha, about an inheritance, about an estate. We also apply the expression achuza, because something which someone gets as an inheritance, he's really holding on to it strong. It really belongs to him. Just like we find the expression in Mishnah, Shnayim oichzim betalis. Two people hold on to a talis. They're both grabbing hold of it. And in such a way was the way how Yaakov and his family was settled in Mitzrayim. And as the pasuk continues, right after that, when we go into Parshas Vayechi, and interesting, between Vayigash and Vayechi, there is no hefsek. As Rashi himself says at the beginning of Parshas Vayechi, that Parsha zu stuma. What is the meaning Parsha zu stuma? Normally we find between one Parsha and the other, either there's a space of 9 letters between one Parsha and the other, or we go to a new line. Between Vayigash and Vayechi, there is neither. Neither the space of 9 letters, neither a new line. It's just like from one word to another. If such type of an arrangement would be in another Sedra, it would cause a psul in the Sefer Torah. The Sefer Torah would not be good. However, here, this is the way this is supposed to be. And we go right into Vayechi Yaakov be'eretz Mitzrayim Shvayas Rishona, that Yaakov lived his best years. Where were his best years? In Mitzrayim. And it's also brought out in the fact that it was 17 years, because 17 is Begematria Toiv. Which all of this is bringing out the specialty, how comfortable it was for Yaakov and Mitzrayim. But nonetheless, this is Golus. And a Yid does not belong in Golus. How good it is for him. Mentioning about, if this case, the way the connection of Vayigash and Vayechi is, if this case would be in another Sefer Torah, it would be Apostle Sefer Torah. Here the Rebbe mentions that there is a Zohar, where the Zohar writes about a Sefer Torah which was found, and it had one additional letter in it, which just naturally causes a problem in the Sefer Torah. And this Zohar is part of the texts which we recite in the Minor Lashon, which the Minor Lashon has said when we go to pray on the rest places of Tzadikim Kedoshei Elyon, and as well as when we go to the place where the Frierdiker Rebbe is, and it was fulfilled by them, Ofar Atov El Ofar Toshuv, even though there were no changes in their guf, but nonetheless they are there in Ofar, and it's that way for many, many years. To the extent that by the Frierdiker Rebbe, so over 40 years were already passed, the period of 40 years, the period of, as it was discussed, Leiv Lodas, V'nayim Lirois, V'nayim Lishmoya. And now we are in this special year, in the year of Arenu Niflois. And in the year of Arenu Niflois itself, we are already in the month of Tevis. Regarding the month of Tevis, the Gemara tells us, based on the pasuk, Vatilokach Esther al Beis HaMelech, that Esther was taken to the Beis HaMelech in the month of Tevis. Says the Gemara that this is a month Shehaguf Nehene Min Haguf. The Guf has Hanoah from the Guf, which bechlal the entire contents of Megillas Esther is an inyan of Arenu Niflois, is an inyan of Nisim, and such type of nace above the usual type of nace. That is why when it comes to celebrate Purim, the Simcha on Purim is a much greater one than the Simcha of all of the Yomim Tovim. And that is why it's brought in Medrash that Kol HaMoedim B'Teilim when Mashiach will come, all Moedim will become bottle except for Purim. So naturally, it doesn't chas v'shalom mean that all the Moedim will not exist any longer. It just means that the revelation which comes in a regular yontif will be kishraga b'tiara, like a light in the middle of the afternoon. Just like in the middle of the afternoon, there's no need to light a candle, because there's strong enough light. Same thing, the Giluyim then will be tremendous ones. However, the Gilui which Purim offers is such a great one that even La'asid Lavai, at the time when all Me'edim will become Batal, Purim will still exist. So this is the month, getting back to our, and now we are in the month of Teves, we're already into the month of Teves, and this is the time when Guf Nehenim in Aguf. And what do we mean Guf Nehenim in Aguf? Guf means there's the Yesh HaNivra, which is called the Guf, and then there's the Yesh HaAmiti, the creator of everything, who is also called the true Yesh, the true one in existence. And that is Atzmus HaMozav HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And here we say that the Avodah V'Yid in this month is that it should be Guf Ne'enem in Aguf. That the Rebishter, the Yesh HaAmiti, should gain enjoyment from the Avodah of a Yid here Lamata Neguf. The Yesh HaAmiti should have his Tainug from the Yesh HaNivra. And all of this should come through long years and health. This is also what Chazal tell us, based on the pasuk Vayechi Yankov, which is Pashas Vayechi, which we are beginning to read today to Mincha. So Chazal tell us Yankov Avinu lo yimeis, that Yankov Avinu did not pass away. And this Gemara goes on with the expression Ma zaroi b'chayim afu b'chayim. Just like his children are alive, he is also considered alive. What do Chazal tell us in these words? That what gives life to Yaakov, that is the way his children act. And when the children of Yaakov are acting accordingly, they are involved in lebedike zachen, in things of life. What do we mean by things of life? Torah, because Torah is called Torah's Chayim, and mitzvahs, because our mitzvahs we find the expression v'chai b'hem. And when Yidden are involved in all of these inyanim, all Yidden, anoshim, noshim, v'taf, then this brings life to Yankov, that Yankov Avinu lo yimeis. And this specialty of Yankov Avinu lo yimeis we find dafke by Yankov, not by anyone else of the Avis, because Yankov was the B'chir Sheba Avis. He was the most chosen one of the Avis. That is why everything by Yankov is bishleimus, at the highest level, whole and complete. But on whom is all of this depending? All of this depending is on the Avodah of Yid. That the Avodah of Yid is Vayechi Yankov B'Eretz Mitzrayim, that in Mitzrayim and through Mitzrayim, Mitzrayim is an union of Meitzah, but through this Meitzah, he will work it out that he will come to the true merchav, to the true broad way of serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and create this world, that this world should be a dwelling place and a resting place for the Shechina. As we find that there's a difference, there are two types of surroundings around a person. There's a garment and there's a house. A garment has to be fit to size. It is like bigger than the person, but nonetheless it has to be within a certain size. If it will not be within the size, but it will be bigger than the size, then not only will it not fulfill its purpose, it will defeat its purpose. A person will trip over it, and it wouldn't bring what clothes is supposed to bring. However, the concept of a house is, it's also a makif, it also surrounds the person. However, it is a makif harachoik. And this makif harachoik, this is what a house is all about, and this is what the Avodah V'Yid is. Vayechi Yankov B'Eretz Mitzrayim, through the Mitzarim of Gvulim, through the limitations of Golas, through the limitations of Mitzrayim, he will break through all the limitations, and it will be Min HaMeitzah Karosi Yudkei, and he will get the response of Ononi B'Merchav. The Rebbe will respond in a broad way, Dafke through his Avodah, which comes from Meitzah, from a narrow and tight way, which this is what Golas has an effect on him. But nonetheless, he does not stop his Avodah. And this applies to all Yidden, men, women, and children. With this we can understand what we find in the Sedra. When food was prepared, so the Torah uses the expression lechem lefi hataf, food accordingly for children. Do children need a different type of preparation than adults? However, this can be explained, continued the Rebbe. The nature of a child is that not only does a child take the food that he eats, but there's a lot of waste by a child. Mm-hmm. By a child there is waste, which a child throws around him and wastes around him and so forth. And this is what we say, that everything is provided. Lechem lefiyat haf. Not only what is needed for eating, but everything is provided.
Oh, that's how.
And the same thing, when we're talking about bread, when we're talking about food, doesn't only mean gashmistika food. It refers to spiritual food as well. In lachma shel Torah. In lachma shel Torah, we also say that Aveda v'yid has to be not only in this limited portion, but it has to be above any type of limitation, above medidas v'hagbolas. And here the Rebbe is using the expression of taf, children, lechem lefiyat taf. So the Rebbe is continuing, and this is also what we find in the Kapitel Tilem, Kapitel Taf. Kapitel Taf meaning Kapitel Peites. Right. Peites, the other way, is Taf. Kapitel Taf, which concludes with the words, Baruch Hashem li'olam, Amen v'Amen. It's also an Indian of above the limitation. And from here we continue into Kapitel Tzadik, which Kapitel Tzadik emphasizes Tfilah LeMoshe, and then we go on to Yoshev B'Seiser Elyon. Because Yoshev B'Seiser means that this will be a revelation from the Chesed Hashem, which is the hidden Chesed, and this will be brought down into Toiv HaNireh VaHaNigla, and then we will have such type of revelations that we will be able to see the Koyach HaPoyel B'Nifal, the Koyach of the Master and the Creator in whatever He created. It is told that the Maggid of Mizrich, was able to recognize on an object who was the person that made it. Once recognized on an object that this object was made by a person who was limping. However, in those days, it was only the Maggid who had this specialty. When Mashiach will come, and it will be the Ro, Kol Basa, Yachtov, everyone will be able to see the tremendous revelations of godliness that will be revealed, and as well as the niflois, the wonders of Torah, because in Torah there is also an inyan of niflois, and all of this will be revealed at a time of Torah Chadosha Me'iti Teitzei, and that will be at the time of Geula Amitis VaShleima. And all of this is through the Avodah Vayechi Yankov. Yankov being alive. And it doesn't necessarily mean Yankov, it means Yankov's children. Zaroi. And as we just mentioned the Chazal, when Zaroi B'Chaim, when his children are alive and his children are involved in the matters of life, this is giving life to Yankov. And then this leads that it is Vayechi Yankov. Even in a matzav of Yankov Yud Eikev, which is a low madrege. Yud Eikev, why was he given this name of Yaakov? Because Yodei Echezes Ba'akev Esav, he was holding on to the heel of Esav. That is why he was called Yaakov. Even in such a level, even in a level of Eretz Mitzrayim, even in a level of Min HaMeitzah. But nonetheless, Yidden break through these mitzarim mikvolim, break through these limitations until we will come to the shleimus ha'amiti, and that will be when will we have the highest and complete revelation. That will be when Mashiach will come, as the Tzemach Tzedek, who just had 200 years from his birth, brings out the greatness of Mashiach, that Mashiach will be a melech, as well as Mashiach will be a rav, who will teach Torah to Yidden. And then we will have the shleimus of Torah we will have when Mashiach will come. And all of this is dependent on our Avodah now. And the Rebbe is continuing that this is the Shabbos which is following Chanukah. Because Chassidus explains on the pasuk Vayichulu hashamayim va'aretz v'chol tzavon that everything has its aliyah, has its elevation when it comes Shabbos. So this is the Shabbos that's giving the elevation to Chanukah. And this week we had the day of Zois Chanukah, and Zois Chanukah is the final day of Chanukah. So the elevation of all matters of Chanukah is really today. And what are the heroes of Chanukah? Primarily, just like we find by Chanukah licht, mitzvah al anichon al Pesach beisa mibachutz, that the mitzvah of Chanukah is that to make lichting in the outside, to bring the nail mitzvah of Torah here, and we bring it where into the outside. Just like we recite in Valanisim. What do we say in Valanisim? That after the Nes of Chanukah, v'hidliku neirois bechatzchos kodshecha. Where did they kindle lights, candles? Bechatzchos kodshecha, in your holy yard. This cannot refer to the lighting of the menorah, because the lighting of the menorah was not in a way of neirois. First, it started off with neir, with one candle the first night. The second night, it came to neirois, to two, and so forth. Being that we recite here, vidliku neirois bechatzchos kodshecha, right away it was celebrated in a way that they kindled many neirois. So we must say that this is not the lighting of the menorah, but other candles which they kindled. But where did they light this? On the outside, on the chotzer. A chotzer is a yard. A yard emphasizes the outside, not within the house, because this is the whole idea of Chanukah. The whole idea of Chanukah is to bring lichtigkeit and warmth into the outside world, and this leads to lahoides u'lahalil l'shimcha agodel, that the Rebishter's name becomes great and fame. Until we will come to the revelation which we have after Pashas Vayechi. After Pashas Vayechi, we continue into Pashas Shmos. Pashas Shmos starts with Ve'ela Shmos B'nei Yisrael. Reuven v'Shimon, they went down to Mitzrayim as Reuven v'Shimon, and they came out of Mitzrayim as Reuven v'Shimon. Now, what is the meaning of Reuven? Reuven is Re'u Bein, that it will be noticeable on every Yid that he is a Bein LaHaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the same regarding Shimon. And all of this is brought into all the Shvatim, so that we will have the Geula HaMitis VaHashleima. That not only being in Mitzrayim will it be in the Nina Vayechi Yankov, but we will have the Geula B'Poyel immediately. The Rebbe continued, as mentioned, that this is the Shabbos which comes following Chanukah. Which means that all the matters of Chanukah, all the specialties and the heroes that Chanukah teaches us, as we mentioned right now, the inyan of Pesach Beisa Mibachutz, and also the inyan how Chanukah emphasizes the concept of being Moisef HaHelech, how we have to keep on going higher and higher, we can never stop. When do we bring all of this into reality? Once we are going out of Chanukah. When we're going out of Chanukah, we're taking these messages with us, that is then we see that we have absorb the message of Chanukah properly, and we're taking this message with us. Why is the Yontif called Chanukah? So one of the main reasons is because it was, at that time, it was the dedication of the Beis HaMikdash, Chanukas HaBayis. And B'Korev Mamish, we hope that we will have the Chanukas HaBayis of the third Beis HaMikdash, the Beis HaMikdash which was erected by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Mikdash Adnai Koinenu Yedecha. Based on the concept that all revelations which will be forthcoming la'asid lavi are all dependent on our maisim, on our deeds and on our avodah which we do now. So we have to say that we have to do something similar to it now while we are in Golus. That is why the Rebbe says it is proper to alert everyone that everyone should be involved in making a Chanukas HaBayis. A Chanukas HaBayis for a house of Torah, and for a house of Tefillah, and for a house of Tzedakah. And to make sure that we bring into our houses, that our houses should have Svarim, holy Svarim in our houses. And when a house has holy Svarim, that is when it is called a Bayis Shel Torah, to the extent that it becomes a Bayis Moli Svarim. A house full of Svarim. What is the Taich, a house full of Svarim? It could be a house with Svarim. Expression could have been Bayisim Svarim. So we say no. The emphasis on it is that it has to be such a house where it is felt that what is the hashpoah in the house, the main thing in that house is Svarim. Could be, we could have a house, we could have Svarim, and we could have other things. So we say no. What is felt in the house, and what has the dominant rulership in this house, the fact that this is a Bayis Moli Svarim. And this is that way in all rooms, and this permeates this concept into all rooms. And we're talking about a house of Torah beginning from the beginning of Torah. Torah begins with the Aseres HaDibros, and the Aseres HaDibros begin with the word Anochi. Torah itself, the Rebbe began with a base, Bereshis. However, Aseres HaDibros begin with Anochi, and as Chazal tell us on Anochi, that Anochi abbreviates Anor, Nafshi, Ksavis, Yahavis. That the Rebbe says that Anor, I, he himself, has taken his soul and has written it in, and has given it in, has given himself into Torah. And this is what every Yid can have access to. When the Medrash uses the expression of Bayis Moli Svarim, that is used regarding Koyrach. Koyrach was complaining that if you have a Bayis Moli Svarim, how can we say that we need a mezuzah on this? Because the house already is full of Svarim, why should we need a mezuzah? But on the other hand, says the Rebbe, this can be explained in the positive way as well. Koyrach pikachoya, Koyrach was smart. That's what Chazal tell us. What is the concept of a mezuzah? Concept of a mezuzah is that it guards a person. Hashem yishmer tzeisho ve'yacho. Me'ato v'ad oilam. From now on to ever, the Rebbe will guard our entering and our coming in and our coming out. Wherever a Yid is, a mezuzah guards him and a mezuzah watches him. And that is why Koyrach, who was a pikach, who was an intelligent person, he thought that the Bayis Moli Svarim is already such a high level that one shouldn't even need a mezuzah if he's at the level of Bayis Moli Svarim. But the truth is that was an error. But what we see from this is that even Koyrach realized the greatness of a Bayis Moli Svarim. That a Bayis Moli Svarim means that the house is such that the full hashpoah in the house is from the Svarim that are there. And if it's possible for a person to add more Svarim, let him go ahead and add more Svarim. Here the Rebbe continued that al Torah there is a concept. Maschil b'mitzvah imrim lo yigmor. When somebody begins in a mitzvah, we tell him that he should also finish the mitzvah. We also know what Chazal tell us on the pasuk, Magi dvorav liyankov chukav v'mishpatav liyisrael, that what the Rebbe is commanding us to do, he himself also does. So being that it was already the beginning of the Svarim coming back to their originality where they belong, let the Rebbe finish, let the Rebbe fulfill, that he will also finish and see to it that all Svarim and all belongings come back to their place where they belong. And it will be Pidyon Shvuyim, just like there's a concept of Pidyon Shvuyim on people to bail out someone who's a hostage. The same thing applies to Svarim as well. A sefer, when a sefer is in its wrong place, we have to redeem it and make sure that it comes back to its place where it belongs. And the same thing, all of those that have already begun in the involvement of bringing Svarim back to its place, they too, that they should finish. And Gemoyer doesn't only mean finish, Gemoyer is Maloshin Mugmar. In Gemara there's an expression, Mugmar refers to a psomim that have a good scent, that's called Gemoyer. In other words, this will lead to an union of Gemoyer, Maloshin Mugmar. The Rebbe also continued in the following Sikha, continuation to this Sikha, that this also applies not only to adults, but this refers to children as well. That even though a child may maintain his siddur, he will hold in shul, and his Sefer he will hold in the Beis HaMedrash, or even a Tzedakah Pushka he will also hold in Shul. And at times he will hold the Tzedakah Pushka in Shul, because in Shul he can accomplish more with it, because there he will see people, and he will ask them that they should contribute and throw into the Tzedakah Pushka. But nonetheless, every child has to have all of these things in his room. Sayeh bayis shel Torah, a sayeh bayis shel Tefillah. In other words, a siddur which makes it a bayis shel Tefillah, as well as a chumash and other svarim which makes it a bayis shel Torah, and a tzedakah pushke which makes it a bayis shel tzedakah gemilas chasadim. And then, when the child has all of this in his room, that is when it becomes a Chanukas Habayis. We dedicate this house, the dedication for a house of Torah, a house of Tefillah, and a house of Tzedakah. And even it may be a small house, it may be small only in Gashmias. However, a house that contains all of these things is considered a Bayis Godel. It is a large house, it's large in Ruchnias. And just like from the lesson of Chanukah, from Chanukah we derive that we have to bring light into the outside. So the same thing when somebody walks into such a room and sees all these things that are in this room. It is a house of Torah, it is a house of Tefillah, and it is a house of Tzedakah. It will have an effect on them as well, that they too will turn their rooms into such, that their rooms will also become a house of Torah and a house of Tefillah and a house of Tzedakah, and they will be mechanech, they will make a Chanukas Habayis on all of these levels in their own rooms. This is one of the inyanim which we find in Chanukah. We find by the Rabbeim that there was the custom of giving Chanukah geld. The Rebbe says this year what he did was he gave Chanukah geld also on the night of Motzoi Chanukah. In other words, it was Wednesday night. Wednesday was Zois Chanukah, and Wednesday night when the Rebbe came back from the Yoel, the Rebbe gave out dollars, and he said, "This is also This can still be referred to as Chanukah geld, because he wanted to bring to the attention to those that did not receive Chanukah geld yet, or those that did not give Chanukah geld yet, that it can still be completed." The same thing when we're talking about the inyan of tzedakah. It has to be a pa'ula nemshechas, it has to have a continuity, that everyone should be involved in the giving of tzedakah, whether it's giving tzedakah to individuals or giving tzedakah to institutions. And tzedakah is something which can be given at all times, even though it's brought in Svarim that night is not a time for tzedakah. But nonetheless, when the gabbai tzedakah comes, a gabbai tzedakah for an institution, or a poor person himself comes and he asks for tzedakah, so then there is definitely the obligation of responding to their request. Nos pesayach tiftach es yotcha, we have to open our hand and we have to give him. Even though we find in Chazal, the Gemara tells us, the Mishnah says, regarding Peah, which was the leftover at the end of the field, which when Yidden were in Eretz Yisrael, we were obligated to give that to the poor. So the Mishnah says that there were set times, 3 times during the day, when the poor people would be permitted to come and collect the Peah. But nonetheless, the mitzvah of tzedakah is such, this was an arrangement which was made. The mitzvah of tzedakah is such that it has to be at all times. Many years ago, Farbrengen, the Rebbe once mentioned that he was, in the years when the Rebbe lived in Paris, he once came into a shul at night, to Ma'ariv, and he went over to the pushke and put some money into the pushke. So Yid came over to him. Actually, obviously, he didn't know he was coming over too. And he tells him, "Junger man, bei Nacht gibt man nicht kein tzedakah." At night is not a time to give tzedakah. After a while passed, and the Rebbe came to visit the Frierdiker Rebbe, who at that time lived in Poland, in Otwock in Poland. The Rebbe related this incident to the Frierdiker Rebbe. So the Frierdiker Rebbe's comment was, "Mistome, probably git jener batog euch nicht." The person who gave you that comment, he doesn't give tzedakah during the day either. And in this, getting back to this week's Seder, in this week's Seder we find how Yosef is getting close to Yehuda. Yosef and Yehuda are becoming close to one another. Yosef's inyan is Talmud. Yehuda's inyan is Maaseh. Even though in each one of them we find how they have the other inyan as well. Because in Torah it cannot be just one inyan. Even how we find it by Yisachar and Zvulun. How we find that Yisachar's inyan was Torah. And Zvulun's inyan was Maisim Toivim. Zvulun was the one who supported Yisachar. Nonetheless, in order to have a complete cycle, Zvulun also has to have an inyan in Torah. And Yisachar also has to have an inyan in Maisim Toivim. And the Asid Lavai, brought out in Chassidus, that is when it will be emphasized the gadlus, the greatness of Maaseh, and we'll have the completeness of Vayigash Elav Yehud Echad Be'echad Yigashu, and all of this will be in a way of a Chanukah Sabayis. Then we will have the Chanukah Sabayis on the third Beis Hamikdash, and all of this will come as a result of our work in Pesach Beis Mibachutz, that we will reach out to the outside and we will bring Lichtigkeit to the ganze Welt. And all of this will lead to the Gula Amitis Vashlema. It was somewhere in the Farbrengen where the Rebbe referred to Sefer Tilim. That Tilim has 150 kapitlach. 150 is 15 times 10. Says the Rebbe that there was a time by Yidden that when there were problems and there was a need to say Tilim, Tilim was recited in multiples of 10 kapitlach. However, now that we are in a time of Cherus, let us hope that we will only say freedom. In the time of Cherus, in the time of freedom, let us hope that we will only have to say Tilim as an expression of Shirim v'Sishbachos, as an expression of song and praise to HaKadosh Baruch Hu.